Well, last time we spent quite a bit of our time looking at Isaiah 65, at the presence of death, at the state of creation, looking at the millennium compared to the eternal kingdom. If you recall, in fact, let's just turn there over to Isaiah 65. Isaiah 65, part of the final piece of the book in the construction of Isaiah. The last 20 or so chapters are a detail of Christ, of his work on this earth, both in his first coming and into his second coming. And we find that Isaiah 65 is prophetic of that second coming, of the condition of the world when he's here. And we'll just begin reading at verse 17. So Isaiah 65, verse 17, it says, "For behold, I create new heavens and new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people, and the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying. There shall be no more thence an infant of days, or an old man that has not fulfilled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. And they shall build houses and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. They shall not build, and another inhabit. They shall not plant, and another eat. For as the days of the tree are, the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth for trouble, for they are the seed of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. And it shall come to pass that before they call I will answer, and while they are yet speaking I will hear. The wolf and the lamb will feed together, and the lion will eat straw like the bullock, and the dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountains, says the Lord." Now it's interesting to see here, just something that hopped out there in verse 25, the curse that was put on the serpent remains. That's an interesting thing to see, in all of everything being rejuvenated and everything being replaced, made new. We find that the serpent's curse that was given to it there in the garden remains. I don't know. I find that interesting. We find this mention of death there in verse 20, and the implication is that in this new heavens, this new earth, this isn't going to be a reality anymore. There's not going to be death anymore. But we find that there is death preceding that new heaven, that new earth, going into eternity. We find with the state of creation a renewal and a restoration of the earth, but that it is still temporal, right? It's still everything's still physical. Everything is still in the sort of reality that we know and understand now. Certainly for the people that are dwelling in the earth, for the bride it may be a bit different. We may already have that spiritual aspect to it there, as well as we'll have renewed bodies. We'll have our new bodies there. But we find that the earth is also still subject to entropy, right? If death is there, sin is still present in the earth, as we looked at a few, I think last week and a couple of weeks ago. We find that there's still the laws of nature, that law of nature, that everything goes from a higher state of energy to a lower state, right? And we find also Isaiah 11, 6 and 9, really a repetition of what we just read in 65:25, that the wolf will live with the lamb, or lay down with the lamb, They won't hurt or destroy in his holy mountain. Let's go ahead and turn there. This is talking about Christ, right? Remember the verse 1 says, "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots," talking about Jesus. And beginning in verse 6, it says, "The wolf also will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together. The lion will eat straw like an ox, the suckling child will play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And in the day there shall be a root of Jesse, in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious." Now we'll just stop there. But we find that with Christ there on the throne, this peace is brought on the earth. The nature of things, the nature of animals is changed to where there's not this predator-prey interaction anymore. There's still death, right? Sacrifices are still brought to Jerusalem. Animals are still slain in those sacrifices, in those feasts and festivals, unless something is drastically changed about those feasts, about those festivals. But we find that as far as nature is concerned, Jesus comes and he changes things with his rule. He changes things with his reign. And going into eternity, we find sort of the expansion of this, where sin is no longer a factor, right? New heavens, new earth, something that has not been touched by sin, something that is in essence a renewal of the Garden of Eden before sin came in, right? And we find that the earth is completely made new for this perfect relationship between God and his creation. We find that this is really the story of the whole Bible, right? It's bookended with the Garden of Eden. It's bookended with this picture of God having a perfect relationship with his creation. Before sin came in, God walked with man, talked with man. Man was placed over creation, a steward over the creation, but we understand that it was still under God, right? His directive from God was, don't eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Try and say that 3 times fast. But he was put in charge of the garden. He was put in charge of creation. We find that at the very end, the physical aspects of the garden, certain physical aspects of the Garden of Eden, are present in the holy city. We find that the tree of life is in both of those places. We find that God is in both of those places. We find this renewal, and we find that the rest of the Bible is really an accounting of how God intends on getting back to what he started, right? Getting back to that nature, that perfect relationship with creation, with mankind. But,
my aunt has a little notation in here that says that the animals are symbolic of people. She has the leopard as the Greek Empire.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
She don't really distinguish anybody else, though.
Mm-hmm.
There are many preachers that have gone into the symbology of the prophets, and that part especially, where they're describing the nations as animals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It got really to be a thing for a long time with a lot of people. Although there, I'm sure, are parallels, I'm not sure that's what it was intended for.
Right. I think we had that conversation for a while last week with Darren, with the wolf and the lamb and Israel and these different things. And there are places where there's very obvious parallels with nations and beasts, right? Daniel is one that comes to mind with the beasts in Daniel's vision being nations, but there it's explicitly stated that they're nations, right? The things that they're doing are explicitly demonstrated to be that of nations, where here we find more of the implication being a changing of nature. We don't find the same sort of language being used here as we do in those other places. Not saying parallels can't be drawn, but just where they are typically drawn in the scriptures, usually it's pretty blatantly laid out for us. Before we move on to our next slide, were there any other thoughts, any other questions from where we've come from so far?
I think it's interesting what's happened to the bear of Russia this past few weeks here.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting their claws trimmed.
Yeah. Well, we know and we understand that when it comes to nations, since we're on the topic anyways, that Satan rules the nations, but God directs them. Or maybe that would be better said flipped around, where Satan directs the nations, but God rules them. God sets up their kings and makes them fall. God puts them in place. He allows them their time, but it's under the direction of Satan, right? Satan is, for lack of a better way to put it, he is the ruler of this world right now, right? He's in charge, and we can see that just in the wickedness that we see coming out of a lot of these governments, right? A lot of the deep-seated wickedness that's behind the governments of the world. In fact, we even find it was true in Jesus' time, right? Where I think of the churches of Asia, the 7 churches of Asia, there in the first 3 chapters of Revelation, and how the nation or the places where they're at, one of them, I think it was Philadelphia, is described as the seat of Satan's throne, right? This place where Satan is.
Yeah, when it comes to leaders of nations, God puts them in. But the trouble is, the enemy has been around for centuries, and he knows how to work people. He knows how to push the buttons. He knows what motivates them and how to use this flesh of ours to our disadvantage. And so the leaders often make bad decisions, and they're in the clutches of the enemy, but they don't even usually know it.
Right.
And this is where praying for our enemies, so to speak, or the leaders of our nations is very important. I've been doing that and been kind of excited about the changes I've seen since I started, so that's kind of a neat thing I think we should do. About the lion laying down with the lamb and these sorts of pictures that are talking about that, I think they're more related to, though, the fact that, you know, right now, there's such a thing as a carnivore. This is normal in our world that we're in now. However, it wasn't that way in the Garden of Eden. And I believe that what it's saying is there's going to be a reversal of that, and that it's going to be a different world, a more peaceful world. And when it says the lion will lay down with the lamb, I think it's talking about the natural order of things being changed to where lions won't eat lambs anymore. You know, so the lion will eat straw like an ox, it says. So I think more that's the purpose of that, saying that at that point. It's not really symbolizing nations or anything. However, it may have a parallel because, you know, when the enemy has been tied up for 1,000 years, he can't do as much. And so you're going to get more just and righteous and sensible leaders that actually lead for the good of the people. So there's hope there. I think also that it's a symbology that has to do with our own lives also, because there's conflict in us. And I think that a lot of those conflicts will be resolved because Christ will be reigning actually on the throne. So it's a picture. But it's a beautiful picture.
It is. And it is interesting to see that God works with and through wicked nations. And there's many places in the Bible where he directs those wicked kings, he directs those wicked nations to his will. It's not that he can't do that. In fact, I think he does it every day. But we see that when Christ comes, when he's the king over all, any national boundaries, any national identity will all recognize him as king. He's still the ruler, even if they're on the completely other side of the world. They're still under his rulership. And that's, I think, one of the biggest changes that we find in the world at that time is everything that comes along with having Christ as king. Right? We understand in our Christian experience the difference that having Christ as king in our lives makes. We're different people. Right? There's a comfort and a peace that comes with just knowing that Christ is in charge of our lives and we don't have to worry about it. Now imagine the whole world like that. It's kind of incredible to think about.
You know, on those same lines, we see the blessing of the blessing that comes upon those that do serve and take pleasure in serving God, and the things that the destruction that comes from not doing that. I was looking at a podcast concerning Russia and Ukraine and how Russia has lost so many men that they have lost over 2 or 3% of their workforce, and they're the young men. The old people are holding down the fort back in Russia,
Right.
while the young men are out fighting on the lines. They've even emptied the prisons and made them into soldiers. And they're just pouring them into battle to take whatever they can, and even though they're sending them to their own destruction. I find this appalling that this is happening to the people, but it's their ruler that is causing the trouble, and he's the one directing them into battle and into harm's way, and even their economy, the economy of their nation. They've borrowed so much money to pay for the arms and all of that, and the nation is going to have to pay for it. The people, not Putin. He's not the one that's going to pay for it.
Ms. Sierra,
I had a clarifying question. The events where it talks about the wolf and the lamb. Is that the millennium, or is that after the millennium?
it seems like in 11 especially, that's during the millennium, certainly going into the eternal kingdom, but it seems like chapter 11 is talking about as Christ takes his throne. Now I could be wrong about that, and I can't really see you, so if you have a question, stop me. All right. Well, good thoughts. Let's move along here. So, the next thing for us to consider is Jerusalem and worship. We find that as Christ comes in, many promises throughout the scriptures that his throne will be established in Jerusalem. Right? We went over that a couple of months ago now. The various places where it talks about Jesus ruling from the throne of David, ruling from Zion, his throne being there in Jerusalem. There's a very strong physicality to that promise. We can't really make that a metaphor without messing with the character of God, the way that he communicates to us, and without saying, well, just generations upon generations of people were stupid and completely misunderstood this. Right? Now, there are things that generations of people get wrong, but God was pretty clear. Right? He's talking to a Jewish audience. They understood what the physical nature of Jerusalem. That's where their minds went when God said, "I'll establish my throne there." Right? It goes back to his promises to Abraham, to his promises to Israel. I'll be your God, you'll be my people. The nations, if you serve me and obey me, will bring their offerings up to you. Right? We see an expanded picture of this as Christ takes his throne. But let's turn over to Zechariah 14.
Where are we going?
Zechariah 14.
Zechariah.
Where's that? Okay, that.
If you can find Matthew, turn about 10 pages backward and it should be right there.
And what chapter was it?
14.
14. Sierra, would you read verse 16 through 21 for us, please?
And it shall come to pass that everyone who is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whichever of the families of the earth do not come up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, on them there will be no rain. If the family of Egypt will not come up and enter in, they shall have no rain. They shall receive the plague with which the Lord strikes the nations who do not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. They shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all the nations that do not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. In that day, holiness to the Lord shall be engraved on the bells of the horses. The pots of the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. Yes, every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holiness to the Lord of hosts. Everyone who sacrifices shall come and take them and cook in them. In that day there shall no longer be a Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts.
Thank you. And we see earlier on in the chapter, in fact, verse 2, that the Lord gathers all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. We find that the city is taken, that the city is pillaged, but the Lord comes and fights against those nations, right? He comes in and slays those people who have come, who have been gathered to Jerusalem. We can think of this kind of like how Pharaoh, right? When Moses went to Pharaoh and told him, "Let my people go," right? Pharaoh hardened his heart. We also find that the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. Now, wasn't the Lord had made Pharaoh without option or choice, right? Pharaoh still had the choice to let the people of Israel go. But there came a point, Pharaoh made up his mind, he made his decision, he was going to refuse to let the people of Israel go, he was going to keep them in captivity, and God gave him the resolve that he had to follow through with that choice. His bed was made, now he had to sleep in it. Right? We find very much the same thing with the nations. It's not that the nations were just completely removed of their ability to decide, to choose. These were nations that already had violence in their hearts against Israel. These were already nations that had violence against the people of the Lord in their hearts. We find that in the scriptures, other places in the scriptures, when the Antichrist takes his throne, there is a mass genocide against any who claim the Lord, against any who refuse his rule. Right? He comes in claiming to be God, claiming to be the Messiah, the one that everybody was looking for, and refusal will be met with death. That's just what the scriptures say, and we can pretty much guarantee that the scriptures are right. We look in the world today, maybe not so much yet here in America, but there are places in the world where people are being killed for their faith. It's just the nature of the world. It has been for the last 2,000 years for Christians. Before that, for the Jews. Right? We take a stand, and we understand that our lives are forfeit. our lives are in the hands of the Lord. We find that because of this violence in their hearts, because of this objective to kill that has been given to them by the Antichrist, they're gathered against Jerusalem. They're gathered against the people of the Lord, gathered against his city there, and the Lord goes and fights against them. We find in the scriptures, Isaiah, I think it's 63, one of my favorite chapters in the entire Bible, begins with a question of who is this who comes from Edom with his garments dyed red and dipped in the winepress or the grapes of Bozrah, or something along those lines. But talking about the redness of Jesus' garments as he comes to claim his throne. Talking about how it will be with violence that he comes to claim his throne. We find in Revelation the description of Jesus given that he comes with a two-edged sword coming out of his mouth, slaying his enemies. Right? He doesn't come as a lamb. He doesn't come meek and lowly. When he comes to establish his kingdom, it's going to be with great violence. He is going to put an end to his enemies. We find that there is going to be a remnant of people who did not go up against Jerusalem. A remnant of the nations who was left alive from this campaign against the Lord's people, who was left alive from all the calamity brought on earth, the different plagues and the vials, the trumpets, right? With the things that we read about in Revelation, where 2/3 of mankind is left dead by the time it's all over. We find that there is a remnant of people who are not the Lord's people, who are not the Lord's bride, but a remnant of the nations that are left. And these people are the seed for the nations going into those 1,000 years. Right? They see Christ. It's kind of hard to not believe in Christ when you see him there and you see all these incredible things happening. Right? I think at that point they'll believe. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's safe to say they're believers by that point. But these are the people that the nations are rebuilt from. And these people go up to Jerusalem year after year, bringing their offerings, bringing their glory, observing the feasts in Jerusalem. And we see that this is something that happens throughout the millennial reign. Right? Year after year they go up to do this thing. Where we find that into eternity, there's still the nations, there's still the city, but we find a immortality on everybody. Right? Everybody at that point is immortal because there's no more sin. We find that the second resurrection has come and all the dead are judged. We find that all the dead are given over to their eternities. Right? We find that those in hell, those who are damned, who are condemned, all of that is cast in the lake of fire. That's their eternity. We find that those who were not in hell, those who were in paradise, right? We find that they're raised and apparently they're given their reward within the nations. They're not in the bride, right? The bride's already been resurrected before the millennial reign, but they're resurrected, they're given their rewards. And we find, at least, this is something that has been debated for long before I've been around, but I think this is where outer darkness comes in. Where the outer darkness is an implication, you're away from the city. Right? If the city is the light of the world, God is there in the city, outer darkness is outside of that city. But like I said, it's been a debate what that is for long before I was alive, but that's just the conclusion that I've drawn. We find the inhabitants in the millennial reign is a mix of the resurrected saints, right, the bride of Christ, and mortal survivors who were born during this period, right? Those people in the nations that survived, they're going to continue to have children. They're going to continue to carry on in their lives. We find that the bride no longer marries, no longer has kids, but the nations do. Right? If the bride isn't subject to death, the nations are. You need more kids to come in, right? To fill, even if they're living for half the millennium or for 3/4 the millennium, you still have more people coming in. Revelation 20:4-6 talks about this resurrected reign, those who have already tasted death and had that first resurrection. We find Isaiah 65:23 talking about this labor being in vain, the bearing of children doomed to misfortune, right? The implication of mortal births, but also the change in the world and the nature of the world, and that these kids are going to have a pretty good life. Right? They're not doomed to misfortune. They're not doomed to die at a super young age because of the sins of their parents, like we see now, right? Kids dying and being harmed in horrific ways because of the sins of their parents, the sins of the people around them. We find that this is no longer a factor, where into eternity everybody's mortal. There's no mortals, there's no unbelievers, but the people in the nations are still in the nations, the people in the bride are still in the bride. Right? There's that distinction that's made there. I think that I've brought it up before. I think that the people born in the nations will not have the option to become part of the bride. I think that is something that is reserved for this life, or something that is a reward for those who live, who choose God outside of this millennial reign and this changed nature, this changed reality.
Don't they have a choice still? I mean, whether to serve God or
They
not
do,
at
and
that
we
point.
find that coming up there in Zechariah 14. They can choose whether or not to go up to the city to observe the feasts. They choose to rebel against God when the devil's released and the nations are brought up against Jerusalem, that final rebellion. Right? They have the choice, they have the decision to make, but I think as far as those decisions go, it's just whether or not to be obedient. I don't know that that reward of brideship is there for them after that. Right?
But it just seems to me that in that day, wouldn't it be kind of stupid to choose not to serve God? I mean,
The same could be said for
they can
this day
see it.
too,
They
right?
can see it happening all around them
Yeah.
in that day. I mean, today we see evil being blessed, unfortunately, but in that day, it will not be that way. Why would they choose to serve evil? Why would they choose now? I mean, I don't understand it now, but still, in that day, it'd be an obvious thing.
Right.
As we all have experienced, whether it's us or someone else, what a person wants to see is what they're going to see.
Yeah.
And the problem with sin nature, which there will still be at that time, is that it blinds us to some things and causes us to misperceive things.
Yeah.
So the enemy knows how to push our buttons, like I've said before. He's been studying humanity for centuries.
Yeah.
And he just exactly knows that our nature says, I must be right.
Yep.
Therefore, what I decide is so, whether or not the facts agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to have the same problem then that we have right now. Do people go out and drink and drive? Oh, yeah. Is it smart? No.
Right.
Does anybody think it's smart? No. Even the people doing it know it's not smart. Okay, so sin in that general sense is something that deceives people into being unable or unwilling, is perhaps the worst part, to see the truth.
Right.
So you're going to have people that are looking at the millennium kingdom with Christ on the throne and everything so beautiful, and they're going to be saying, well, I should be on the throne. Or, well, I would like things to be more what I think should be. And they're trying to impose their will over God's, just like they do now.
Right.
And so you still have people who think that, whether it's chance or whatever, they attribute the things around them not to God, not to
Yeah.
his goodness, not to his sovereignty, but to whatever they want to believe, because they want to believe that they are the power of the universe.
Right. Well, we have a perfect example of that exact thing in the scriptures, right? What was one of the first things Israel did after they came out of Egypt and into the wilderness? God brought them to himself at Mount Sinai. What did they do?
Complained they had no water.
The golden
They
calf,
called the calf.
right?
Yeah.
He brought them there through incredible miracles. They all saw the parting of the sea. They walked through that water. They saw the cloud. They saw the pillar of fire. They saw the storm on top of the mountain as God and Moses were communicating, right? As he was talking there. They felt the earth shake. They heard the trumpets blare. And they still made the calf, right? And it's an intrinsic part of our sinful nature, I think, that right now we blame everything and everybody but ourselves. Right? But I think part of what is going to be demonstrated in that time is just how fallen the nature of man is. Right? We can live in a world with a perfect king under a perfect government where the adversary is bound and cast into a bottomless pit for 1,000 years, living essentially the perfect life, and we still find a reason to rebel. And it's incredible, right? Andy?
You know, in the actual fall, where the enemy became the enemy, his real sin was that he wanted to rule. And unfortunately, every child born into this world, as soon as they learn the word no, they are all of a sudden deciding that they should rule their universe, right? Okay, so we are all guilty. We're all infected with that desire to be in control of our lives.
Right.
And it takes a continual effort, even as a mature, experienced, and veteran Christian. It takes a real effort all the time to keep from wanting to rule our lives. And it still pops its little ugly head up now and then and says, but I want, instead of what God wants. And so the opposite of that's what Jesus said, not my will, but thine be done.
Right.
And so in the millennium kingdom, you're still going to have the same thing going on because we're still human beings. Now, I'm sure the resurrected ones are different, but the ones that haven't been resurrected yet, that are still living in the flesh, are dealing with the flesh and the desires of the flesh, and that innate and compelling desire to be in control and to think that I know better than God, which is obviously silliness and foolishness when you look at it. But a lot of people just don't.
Yeah.
They're just sure that they must be right because they're right, you know, because I see it this way, therefore it must be that way.
Right.
And they're not even willing to question their own thinking or to compare it with what God says, or come humbly to him and ask, you know, I don't get it, so will you explain it?
Right.
So, or to say, not my will, thine be done. But so that would perhaps answer why there's still going to be this in the millennium.
Right.
Because there's still going to be sin nature.
Right.
In this same line of thinking, isn't this what Satan tempted Eve with in the garden? To be like God.
Yeah.
You eat of this fruit and you'll be, God is keeping something from you.
Right.
Yeah, and of course, she said, well, I can't have that, you know. You know, all I have to do is eat of that fruit and I'll be like God.
Right.
And this is what, I think this is the, you know, of all of my children, no two had the same personality. I mean, each one has a personality of their own.
Right.
My brothers and I all have different personalities. We each see things differently. And it's that true of all flesh.
Yeah.
I mean, some can agree on some things, but it's rare to have everybody believe the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, but it's the nature of human thinking. It's to be the best, the biggest, the strongest, the smartest, whatever.
Right.
You know, to be number one instead of number two.
Yeah.
But, you know, I have come to the conclusion that I am still fallible. You know, I reserve, I have a way of saying it, I reserve the right to be wrong, to be proven wrong. It comes as a right for humankind to be fallible, to be wrong at times, and frequently, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But many people don't figure that out.
Right.
They haven't come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And we have to realize that we are sinners before we can be forgiven. Realize if you don't think you're a sinner, you're not going to repent of your sin.
Right.
And it's, I now that I'm on this side of it, I have trouble seeing the other side.
Yeah.
And I just wish that everyone could come to that conclusion that man is a sinful creature.
Right. Yeah.
And by nature. And that we need to have God in our lives, replace that nature by the nature of God.
Exactly.
Let Him replace it.
Exactly.
Because we can't do that.
And those are great thoughts to end on. So thank you for that, brother. Thank you for your time, for your participation.